I'd like to call the General Business and Finance meeting of November 4th, 2019 to order. I'd like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see the clerk. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Please note the Town of Lincoln Committee and Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. I'd like to thank the public for attending the meeting this evening, and I just want to remind everyone of our rules of engagement, to please be respectful while others are speaking, and to please refrain from clapping. Please remember to silence all our cellular devices. So roll call of council. We have to my left our CAO Mike Kirkopoulos. We have Councillor Paul McPherson, Councillor Mike Mikulik, Mayor Sandra Easton, Councillor Greg Reimer. To my right we have Councillor J.D. Pachariva, Councillor Tony Bernay, Councillor Diane Rajima, Councillor Adam Russell, and all staff are in attendance. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. There are no statutory public meetings on the agenda. There are no delegations on the agenda. So we're now moving to consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent. Item 6.1, Lincoln Public Library Board minutes of June 18th, 2019. We have item 6.2, Lincoln Public Library Board minutes of September 17th, 2019. And we have item 6.3 FN-20-19 Q3 financial report. Would any member like to remove any items from the consent agenda to discuss? Councillor Pachariva.
Not through you, Chair Timmers, not a removal of it to discuss, but just to make to highlight something that from the library board meeting.
Okay.
If you may.
Yep, go ahead, please. Or are you off? Okay.
I'm back on.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Timmers, through you. Yeah, I just think it's important going forward. We had a great number of delegations at AMO this year. But maybe there's an opportunity going forward where councillors that sit on standing committees like the library board, libraries haven't had an increase in funding for 30 years, that, an opportunity to provide a delegation to that ministry to speak on behalf of the library and ask for an increase in funding. And maybe it's something that they hear, or maybe it's something that they don't hear, but I think the clout of having councillors on there addressing the needs like we did at the other is well worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you're raising there, so very good. Thank you, Councillor Pachariva. So seeing no one else in the queue, we require a mover for this motion to pass the consent agenda items. Councillor Rajima, all those in favor? Those opposed? And that is carried. So we're now moving into our regular agenda. We are now considering item 7.1 FM-14-19 investment report. Are there any questions from council regarding this report? Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Through you, and probably to our CAO, just with regards to the investments that we have tied up, should we have to, do we have a formula? Should we ever have to tap into those investments? We would take a substantial penalty taking them prematurely. Do we have a formula or a plan with regards to withdrawing those funds should that need be necessary?
Councillor Mikulik, I'm going to put us over to Terry to respond to that question.
Fair enough.
Yep. Thank you, Terry.
So through the chair, we do keep a significant balance in our cash and in our short-term investments in order to make sure that we have enough available for the upcoming projects. We do keep an eye on our 10-year capital plan and our next projects coming forward and what's needed so that we make sure that we have cash on hand in order to pay for those. We also reach out to our investment brokers and make sure that they know of any large investments that are coming down the pipeline so that they can make plans to set those cash balances aside, and then we get them cashed out as we need them.
Okay, and the reason why I ask is just if we have large projects coming up or unexpected purchases that we may be forced to deal with, that we're in a financial position to have to deal with that. Thank you.
We have, thank you, Terry. We have Councillor Russell up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the CEO or to the staff. Wondering if you have an idea of what our interest rate is on our outstanding debentures? If you have a blended rate.
Go ahead, Terry.
Through the chair, the debentures that we are paying on, they vary between about 2% to about 5%, I believe, depending on when we actually purchase them.
Okay, so with that in mind, like it looks like our blended interest rate on our investments is about 2% based on the last 5 years. So is it safe to assume that we're paying more on what we borrow than what we are on what we have? Or what we're earning and what we have?
So through the chair, it would be, for one thing, the investments, though, we can change that as the market changes. So we have a bit more flexibility with those. With the debenture, whenever we enter into the agreement, whatever the prevailing rate is there, whether it's high or low, that's what we get. In general, also, you pay more for debt than you get for investment.
Again, the reason I ask is, again, part of our capital budget, we have, again, one of the largest capital budgets we've ever had, if not the largest. And part of the narrative along with that is we are borrowing now because it's cheaper to borrow, where we have money in reserves and we're paying more interest on what we're borrowing than we are on what we make. And so why aren't we reversing that trend a little bit and using more of our reserves instead of borrowing?
Go ahead, Terry, please.
So through the chair, right now, if we enter into debt, our interest rate would be lower. The interest rates across the board are around 2 to 3% for our debentures, so it would be at a lower amount now.
What do you? Okay, I'll save it for capital or COW.
Okay, very good. Next, we have Councillor Pachariva. Oh, let's go again here. Are you off, Councillor Russell?
Thank you, Chair Timmers. And this is probably a question through to the CAO. On page 12, with respect to financial revenue, interest income is expected to be slightly higher than budget, which is a good thing. Staff are continuing to look for opportunities to sell surplus land. We had a report a year ago identifying surplus land. When is that coming back? When are we going to look at actually possibly disposing of some of those assets?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. We've actually been speaking about this a number of times over the last few weeks as we look at finalizing both the operating budget and the capital budget. And so in 2020, you will see us move forward with this and take a much more, I think, dramatic approach or drastic approach to the lands that we do have. There are some exercises that we needed to go through from a planning process that Ms. Dale highlighted. I think the last time we were in front of council, there are processes and procedures that we need to go through in terms of deeming them surplus, reaching out to owners within that area, the public consultation piece that's required with that particular endeavor. And so I think we tried to be careful in 2019 as we went through that exercise, but should be ready early in 2020.
Okay. Good, thank you. So I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue. So we have a motion to receive as information Report FN-14-19, 2018 Investment Report. I require a mover. Councillor Russell, all those in favor? Those opposed? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.2 FN-18-19, Prudent Investor Standard for Municipal Investments. Terry Terwalla will provide some opening remarks for this report.
Thank you, and through the chair. So in terms of this report, just to provide a brief overview of what it's about, prior to a change in legislation that came into effect January 1st, 2019, municipalities only had one option for investments, and that is to go to a prescribed list of appropriate securities. They were primarily government or banking institution securities, and they could only be Canadian. As of January 1st, 2019, municipalities are now allowed to invest in any security globally, and more diversification will lead to higher returns at any given risk level. It must still be done with the care, skill, diligence, and judgment of a prudent investor. And to ensure this is done, municipalities have to delegate the control and management of the investments to a municipal services board. Council would still determine how much to invest, the return objectives, our risk tolerance, and also our liquidity needs. And then the investment board would decide which investments make the most sense to go into. This is still similar to our current operation. We rely on investment brokers to identify which investments and to manage the portfolio in accordance with our policies. The drawback of the new standard is that no other municipalities have yet established a board except for Toronto. There's still a lot of unknowns with this, such as what board structures would look like, what the fees would be. So what I'm asking today is whether council has a desire to look into and consider moving to this new standard, or if satisfied with the returns we're getting with the legal list. If you're satisfied, then I won't investigate any further, but if you would like to explore it a little bit more, I'll bring a report back sometime in 2020 for your deliberation. I'd like to find out from you what kinds of information you'll need in order to make a decision at that time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to open it up for any questions from council. I have Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Without getting too bound down in the processes of the different forms of governance, and since we've never had the opportunity to speak to experts in this area before regarding municipal money, through you to the CAO, I'd be interested in knowing if there would be any benefit to us inviting not one, but two or possibly three highly regarded representatives of the companies that would be doing the investing in the future to, I mean, on the surface, what I was thinking about was having them look at our current financial situation and seeing what they might say without a formal RFP, how we might go about this, how our thought processes could be organized to go forward with this. Otherwise, you know, if the JBIs start organizing, I'm almost certain that the players involved have been thinking about this for a long time. And I would like to know as much as they know before we get to that point. Otherwise, Otherwise, I think it's going to be difficult for us to function independently, because we need to be really clear in our own minds before we give anything over to anybody else, just exactly what this looks like. Now, you and I have had this experience of dealing with investments that are different than, board investments that are different than the municipal investments with banks primarily. And it is a different thought process, and I don't think it's as scary as people think, but there has to be a level of tolerance that represents our circumstances. So I'd like to know what the CAO is looking at, what he's been thinking about in regard to this, because I would like us to do quite a lot of homework before we ever get to the point where we're making any decisions.
Thank you, Mary Sid. I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the mayor and to all of council. I think the mayor's point about bringing in experts to come speak to council, I think are critical. Part of the due diligence period that I think staff are looking at would be definitely to have that type of conversation and to ensure that council is fully briefed, fully up to speed, and that there aren't any inherent risks in moving into this particular type of investment. I think one of the things we saw, and I think the report points out to it, in 2008, when we had that global financial economic crisis, municipalities were all, I think, tightened in terms of where we could invest. Councillor Russell just asked the previous question, can we look at better returns on our investments? And I think, we can, but municipalities, both from a provincial perspective as well as locally, are very conservative in where they put their investments, want to make sure that they have access and liquidity and all those other things that are required as municipalities, and that I think residents expect from us. And so I think we do need to do a lot more studying of that. Sometimes we're probably overly conservative. I know municipalities and CAOs have been talking about how can we maximize our returns. We have huge amounts of dollars in reserves in various accounts that we have. We should be getting more than 1 or 2% on those, but how do we do that and minimize risk at the same time? So I think this is one way of doing it. I think a lot of municipalities need to come together. We're talking about shared services more and more. This would be one of those things. As much as there could be individual boards for municipalities, to me, this is something that should be led on a much more regional level so that we can get the maximum return on the amounts of money collectively that we have as 12 municipalities and a particular region. So before moving forward and even doing the due diligence, I'd also like to hear from my colleagues around the CAO table. Is this something that we can be looking at a lot more holistically than we're currently looking at it? But at the same time, are there things that maybe don't require 12 people or 13 municipalities to come together? And so can we do it on smaller scale ways or approaches? And so I think the recommendation in here is to do that due diligence, but should council even want to take one step further and be even more cautious before we even proceed with any due diligence in any official capacity, we can make sure we have various experts come to council like we have in the past and speak to us about investments, about what we're doing, about how we're doing it, and are there better ways to be doing it?
Madam Chair, I would be very concerned that we wouldn't be in a position to spend some time listening to the way these people talk. How do they address these issues? What is the language that they use? Where are the precautionary messages? How do they come through? And become very comfortable with that so that we can then make whatever decisions we need to. I guess, when you start talking about Toronto has a JIB, if they are a JIB, if they start opening their doors for other people to get involved, you could certainly see that the amount of money involved may generate some pretty interesting returns. But I don't read anything in here that says that you have to invest everything you have. Definitely, starting next year, we need a long-term financial plan for Lincoln. And I was quite pleased to see this. I think it's really great for us to be able to do some additional homework. So I'd like to hear what other people have to say. And But that's the way I'm looking at it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Stin. I think, Mike, you wanted to add something more there?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Mayor and to all of Council. This definitely is a topic that would make for a good council workshop. I know we're looking at that. I think we can dedicate some time, some energy to it, and I think there's some good learnings. You know, I recall in my previous life, we dealt with asset-backed commercial papers, which are really collateralizing financial assets to the benefit of municipalities. As a result of the 2008 economic downturn, that didn't turn out well for municipalities. And so I think there's always just that caution that municipalities take when there's new methodologies and approaches to investing, but definitely something we should be looking at, definitely something we should be talking about. So a recommendation maybe coming out of this would also be to have a workshop where we can bring in the right speakers and spend 2 or 3 hours, if not more, actually going through it.
Thank you, Mike. I think that's a very good idea, to have a workshop where we can really have a really good discussion around this, because it is very, very complicated, a lot to it. I see I have a list of people here, so I'm going to go to Councillor Pachariva.
Oh, sorry. Turn myself off.
Oh dear, you're out of the queue now. Okay, I'm moving on to Councillor Rajima.
Thank you,
I'll come
Madam
back to you,
Chair.
Councillor.
What I'm interested in is to know if there's other models, other municipalities, I guess not in Ontario, but that have these boards in place, and how that's worked for them, and what criteria they put in place for the board members, and just how the whole process has worked in the long run for them. I know it's pretty new in Toronto from what I'm reading. So is there anything that we can look at, or is there any way we can get more information on that through you, Madam Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Rajima. Terry, did you have something to add there? Because I'm curious about the board structure as well, so please
So,
go ahead.
Through the chair, I didn't look outside of Ontario, but that would definitely be something that we would look into and bring back to any sort of workshop or discussion that we have. That's a great idea.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Rajima. Can you turn your mic off, please? We have Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Terry. Just curious, like in this report, there's talk about Toronto being part of this prudent investor. Do we know if Toronto's actually making money through their investments?
Go ahead, please.
Through the chair, so they are, but there hasn't yet been any reports that come out to discuss whether this is has been beneficial to them compared to the market conditions, that sort of thing. So they were one of the ones that were pushing for it, and anecdotally, they say that it's worked, but there hasn't been any empirical evidence yet for it.
I'd be curious, because they've been doing this since 2015. That should be 4 years, and I'd be curious to know if they've actually made any money. I hate to be like similar to a case where my neighbor always tells me how he's getting 10%, and really, you know, he's lucky to have his original principal. So that's a concern I have. Looking at the rates that we have been getting, I have to be honest, I don't really think they're that horrible, considering the fact that we are guaranteed our principal. So there's very limited risk with how we're conducting our financial affairs right now to the taxpayer of actually losing money, unless we somehow should have to withdraw that money prematurely. So I'm curious, and again, I'm willing to listen to other options that are out there, but at the same time, I'm not disappointed with the rates that we're currently receiving. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. I tend to agree with you, but I don't think there's any harm in looking to see if we can do better, so. Next, I have Councillor Pachariva. Don't
Not
touch it.
touching anything, Chair Timmers, thank you very much. Yeah, I would be looking for further due diligence with respect to this. you know, it's a good proposition around shared services, but I'm kind of leery because we were led down the primrose path a few years ago when we entered into an agreement with, Omex and insurance. And, you know, and I'm, for one, and I guess I'm going to be talking out of both sides of my mouth rather than another firm, I always talk about, you know, trying to be cutting edge, but when you're talking money, I would rather be second in, and like Councillor Mikulik said, show us the returns from the City of Toronto. Show us, you know, if you're making marginal gains or extraordinary gains on your investments. And I'd like a report to come at a future date. We heard at AMO last year, City of Edmonton treating their water as a utility. So then it can be self-funded, and then and we can draw upon that. So that's something I would be more pleased to see, and also the due diligence with this.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Patriva. Not seeing anyone else in the queue. Oh, we have Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just quickly, you know, I think this is an opportunity for us, and I would absolutely support putting this to a council of the whole evening to learn, you know, what could we do with this, because I think we owe it to our residents to explore every opportunity to make a better return on the monies that we have invested. And if we don't do that, we're not serving them correctly. And I think, you know, I think we all know this is going to come down to our level of risk. How much are we willing to risk? Because the higher you go, the higher returns could be, and the bigger the dips could be over time. So, you know, it's no different than your own personal investments. So I think we do owe it to, you know, ourselves and to our residents to at least explore the opportunities that this provides to us. So totally support a session on this topic.
I totally agree with your comments, Councillor McPherson. I think it's worth looking at and definitely doing a workshop so we can learn more. So I have Councillor Mikulik, you have another comment?
Thank you, Madam
Or
Chair.
question?
Sorry, I'm going to be a pain about this, but like, as far as this, when we go to vote on this motion, are we going to be voting to direct Terry to further investigate this prudent investor model? Or are we in agreement that we should look at this through a workshop rather than consider her time and resources? And clearly,
Okay.
like, I'm just, before we vote, because this is a pretty entailed process that we're asking Terry to participate in, that may be a little more than we're talking about currently.
Okay, I think our Mike has a comment. Oh, I'm sorry, and Terry, you, okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, and maybe just to provide some clarity, I think maybe we should change the motion, and clerks did provide some additional wording. Towards the end of the second portion of that says direct staff to undertake further due diligence to determine the best approach to move to the prudent investment standard, and says it report back to council with the final recommendation. It's been changed to report back to council with a workshop and then a potential final recommendation.
Okay, that I like. Thank you.
I think that covers everything off. Thank you. Terry, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? No, you're good?
Through the
Okay.
chair, I was just going to suggest perhaps we refer it to.
Okay, very good. So I can repeat that, that motion, but I'm just checking, does anyone else have any questions or comments before we move to the motion? Seeing no one? So I have a motion to receive as information report FN-18-19 Prudent Investor Standard for Municipal Investments, and direct staff to undertake further due diligence to determine the best approach to move to the Prudent Investor Standard, and report back to council with workshop and then a final recommendation. I require a mover for that motion. Counselor Reimer? All those in favor? Those opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. So we are now moving on to our final item on the regular agenda. The item we are considering is 7.3 LS-15-19, procedural bylaw amendments. Questions from council regarding this motion, or this report, sorry. Oh, okay. I'm going to turn it over to our clerk to provide some opening comments. Go ahead, please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through the chair. So staff undertook a review of our procedural bylaw and our meetings to date, and we provided some information to you earlier. So with the review, we've taken a look at how we meet on a regular basis and ensure it's meeting the needs of the corporation. We provide for opportunities of engagement for the public and make the process easier. Staff also looked at continuous improvement where we found efficiencies and industry best practice research. As an example, 11 municipalities in close proximity have changed to this type of structure as it's proposed in the report. There are changes to the acts regarding provincial timelines for Bill 108, and planning deadlines have been affected, and this has impacted municipalities on changing the structure that I've proposed. I'll let Matt Bruder, Associate Director of Planning and Development, speak to that, and then I'll come back with some more comments.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Over to Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Julie and Madam Chair. So, yeah, furthermore to what Julie was saying, that's true. Even from a customer service perspective, the way we deal with things now, when applications come in, we obviously have notification requirements that we need to meet as per the Planning Act. Those require time. If there's not enough lead time prior to a meeting, then they have to go to the next cycle, the applicant does. So that results in a little bit of waiting time for them. So, I mean, there's kind of two benefits to having meetings more frequently for us, the way they're proposed. That's one of them. Providing a more frequent meeting structure allows us to deliver an elevated level of customer service in terms of streamlining our processes and how quickly we can process applications. As Julie said, that's really important because Bill 108 has changed the timelines. If you recall, a couple years back, Bill 139, the timelines were actually increased. That was the result of a lot of consultation with a lot of municipalities. And now that's been completely reversed and actually shortened even more than it was before Bill 139. So, you know, for instance, for a zoning amendment now, we're down to 90 days from the time of complete application. And what that means, those timelines mean is if we don't process the application within that time frame, there is a possibility for an appeal from the applicant for us not making a decision in time. So another benefit of it too that I wanted to highlight is the way the structure is of what's being proposed is in terms of ratification by council. That's another additional week typically that applicants need to wait in terms of bylaws that need to be passed, in terms of recommendations that need to be ratified. And this structure too would address that. So from a streamlining standpoint in terms of planning and development and providing that customer service and meeting our mandated timelines, I just wanted to provide that input, and this would certainly help.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'm going to open it up for questions from council. Oh, I'm sorry, Julie, you had something else to add? My apologies, go ahead.
No, thank you very much, through you, Chair. I just wanted to finish off a couple of the points, and thanks to Mr. Bruder for covering off the planning aspects of it. So the other issue is the multifaceted projects that are coming forward where there's cross-departmental collaboration and breaking down those silos. And so instead of having your separate departments report to a committee, all senior management staff would be in attendance for these types of meetings. And throughout the process, staff had various scenarios that the mayor and members of council were visible to ensure the visibility and also aligned with the professional development for each member of council. And so I'm open to other suggestions that council may have related to the report before you. I can go through those various scenarios, or I can address councilors' questions.
Thank you very much, Julie. I think I would be very interested in hearing those scenarios, but maybe we'll open it up for questions first. I was having a hard time figuring out what the changes are totally, between the two options and what we're doing. And so maybe those scenarios will help to clarify that, what it's going to look like. But I'm going to open it up first for questions. We have Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to Matt. A lot of discussion around planning and the speed with which planning now has to operate. So today we've got basically a 1-month cycle. We've got a 4-week cycle that we're working in. And then we've got a ratification that's the week later. So we've got a 5-week cycle basically to get a plan or a request through. So we're looking to move to a 3-week cycle that would be, help me with this, and maybe this is for the clerk, we'd still have to ratify at the next meeting. Is that, no, we could ratify that same night. Okay, so we are going to a 3-week cycle. So my question is, from a resource standpoint, what kind of pressures does that put on our planning department? And the reason I'm asking that is, as the as the chair of planning, we have accepted each agenda this year as it has been presented. And there's been no, this can't make it, we don't have the time that I'm aware of. So I'm just wondering, from a resource standpoint, how does that work for the planning department to go every 3 weeks?
Through you, Madam Chair. So, good question. Actually, there is, when we do a lot of agenda management too, like I said, a lot of times, in terms of not having the time, it's not necessarily a question of that at the meeting. It's more of what do we have to do before we actually put it on the agenda. So in response to your question about how this affects staff resources, I think it actually helps us because, how we end up now is, yeah, we might have an agenda where maybe we couldn't, get as many people on there as we wanted, but then we go to the next one and we get slammed there and it ends up being a disproportionately large agenda the week after. Now having a more frequent cycle allows us to better equalize, the applications as they go forward. So we're not overloading at one time and then not having any. It's just I think it's a more, like I said, evenly distributed workload.
So through you, Madam Chair, so the agendas are built over a longer period of time than just the 4-week window. So that's what you're telling us, is that this isn't a case of, all these things came at us in the last 3 weeks, we got to get them onto the next agenda. You've got reports in the queue through 3 months, 6 months in advance that are targeted for a certain meeting. Is that what you're telling us?
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, that's correct as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to staff. With regards to, I've got several questions, so cut me off at any time. Just with regards to elected chairs, how are they to be elected? Is it going to be horse trading prior to, or what's the process with regards to the election of the chairs?
Go ahead to the clerk.
So in the proposed structure as I have it, the Committee of the Whole and budget meetings would have an elected chair. But as the deputy mayor schedule is, that was just as is for the regular council meeting. But for the Committee of the Whole and the budget meetings, those would be elected, and we would do the same process as we did in December 2018.
Okay, so names out of a hat, or, okay. And then, with regards to, so my thinking, again, another question, with regards to combining, we're talking about combining planning meetings with council meetings in the same evening? Would that make for a long meeting? And should that be the case, my assumption would be that the matters of planning that would be presented at the time of reception, or how would the queue for the planning projects be determined?
Through the chair, I'll answer this, but if there's anything more entailing with the planning timelines, I'll throw it to Matt. But in speaking about the longer meetings, no, Councillor, what it would do is better streamline the process, and in meeting on a more frequent schedule would be able to disperse the workload more evenly in terms of agenda items. For an example, with the governance team meeting that met, we did a mock agenda of what that would look like, and the statutory public meetings would come after the recognition and proclamations, and so those would stay generally the same as you would see it on a normal planning agenda. Delegations would come after, and then items, just your regular report items. So the statutory meetings would still be happening. And we would be able to take a look at forecasting on what the reports look like and disperse that over a period of time so that we're not meeting for a marathon meeting. That would be very inappropriate, but make sure that we're doing it within a reasonable time frame.
Okay, and if I may, just one more question for now, and
Go
I'm sure
ahead.
there's others in the
Yeah,
queue.
go ahead.
Is there any thought through you to perhaps, or Matt Bruder, is there any thoughts that because there's only one meeting regarding a development or proposed development, by eliminating that planning and economic development meeting, you know, citizens have a chance to speak up to that meeting, and then they have a further chance to speak up at the council meeting pertaining to that topic or issue? Is there a possibility that we may be moving too quick on that, where should we want to reconsider a decision, we may not be able to, similar to what happened in St. Catharines with that CIP program? They have to come up with a new way of, because they quickly made that decision. Or is there also a risk that projects would be deferred back to staff due to, you know, only the one opportunity to speak to it?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I think the idea, you know, we have a kind of a two-stage process when it comes to development applications, where we have the public meeting information report, then we have a recommendation report that comes after. And that would still remain the same. Like, there would still be 2 points. There would be the public meeting where anybody can come up and speak. They don't have to register as a delegation. And then you would still have your subsequent recommendation report where they could do that again. The nice part about that is right after the recommendation report, then we have ratification. So in effect, there still are 2 good opportunities to raise issues. And then, you know, I suppose if there were any extenuating circumstances that came out of the recommendation report that needed to be addressed, well, you could deal with that as required. But at least it gives us an ability to streamline the process a little more while still having 2 good opportunities to hear input.
And would those 2 opportunities occur in the same evening?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, they wouldn't. They'd still be 2 separate meetings.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good for now.
Thank you, Councillor. We have Councillor Rajima.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand, working in planning myself, I understand the increased pressure to meet those timelines. And I've always kind of wondered about having that timeline between approving a planning application and then having to wait for it to be ratified. I don't think it's necessarily necessary if you have the sufficient public process ahead of that. And as Mr. Bruder just said, we could always decide at that time, you know, some issues have come up, maybe we shouldn't be ratifying this tonight. So I understand the advantage of that. A question about, so we're being asked to approve this model tonight. So a question, other than the Bill 108 and the planning issues, and I do have a question after this too, is there any urgency? What is, if any, is there urgency to make this decision tonight?
I'm going to ask that through to the clerk.
Well, there's not really an urgency to it. It's just what staff do as best practice and what other municipalities are moving forward to as their model. The other urgency would be, well, if there was an urgency, Councillor, it would be the selection of chairs. And so if we were to continue status quo, that would be the reason why, and we do that in December, as you know. But not necessarily an urgency, just to conduct best practice and move forward with what other leading municipalities are doing in meeting those timelines.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Madam Chair, I do have another question if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah. So from what I'm seeing, it is planning timelines that's driving this change primarily. Is that correct? And if there is something else, what is it?
So
Through to you,
mostly,
Madam
as it was said in the report, it is to meet the timelines of the Bill 108, as well as to move forward and provide efficiencies for our meeting practices, what we're doing currently.
Okay, Madam Chair, can I ask a question of clarification?
Go ahead.
So the current chair, or the current committee structure that we have, we're proposing to shake it up quite a bit from what I can see. So is there an advantage to, if planning is the main issue in meeting planning timelines, is there an advantage to having a planning meeting, an extra planning meeting once a month as opposed to having 2 council meetings? Would that hit the same buttons that we're trying to hit today?
Through the chair, to the councillor, well, it wouldn't speak to the ratification that we're trying to get to. So it's the ratification that we're trying to administer in a timely fashion, and I can let Matt Bruder speak to the planning timelines.
Okay, can
Go
I?
ahead, Matt.
Yeah, no, sure, Madam Chair. So, yeah, that's essentially it. I mean, you know, having the meeting every 3 weeks definitely helps, but then, you know, like, it actually condenses it or helps us by another week when we consider that, you know, all matters can be ratified at the same meeting. That's something that's a big benefit to us as well. So, I mean, I think Julie pretty much said it best. Those are the main benefits for us.
Okay, Madam Chair, I have another question for clarification.
Okay,
So could
go
we,
ahead.
thank you. So could we not change our processes so that we're not, that we're ratifying our planning approvals at the same meeting that we approve them without changing our whole committee structure? And that would address the ratification question. And the possibility of having extra planning meetings would address the timeline pressures. Did
I
that
don't
make
know,
sense?
did you want to comment on that? I'm not sure who did.
I don't know if that was clear, but my
I'm
question
not
is,
sure on that.
do we need to completely change our committee structure in order to do
meet
away
that.
with the process that we've been following, which is approve and then ratify later? Can we not still just approve and ratify at the same meeting? Because we're a committee of the whole. For planning, we're committee of the whole. We're all here. So do we have to completely redo our committee structure in order to do away with the
Right.
process of having to wait
I'm gonna
That's my
turn it
question.
over to our clerk. She looks like she's got some comments there.
So legislatively, you would have to have a council meeting, counselor, to ratify all decisions. And if you wanted to do that, you would have to have a council meeting immediately after a planning meeting in order to ratify those decisions. It would be a separate meeting, but you would have to do that in the same evening.
Okay.
Okay,
Does
thank you.
does that clarify that for you?
It does, and we're
Okay.
all here at the, I mean, I think that's doable. If we're all here at a planning
We're all
meeting
here.
anyway, I think it is doable to have a council meeting after to ratify this, a bylaw that's already been drawn up and that's been brought to us, assuming there's an approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rajima. Councillor Brunei?
Thank you, Chair Timmers. So some of my questions or my concerns were answered through Councillor Rinjima's comments and responses that we got from the clerk. But I'm still, I mean, when I look at the changes that we made from the term of 2014 to 18, that first 4 years, and now this term, and the changes we made where we merged, different committees. Infrastructure used to be a standalone committee, planning used to be a standalone committee, and we merged those. And I look at, what we had in terms of support, legislative support from the clerk's department in the first term, where we really had William and Gary. And now we have three. I'm other than the planning, I'm struggling with this. I really don't understand where this is all coming from. But having not sat on the governance committee, I'm trying to get brought up to speed. But I'm reading here, maybe through you, Madam Chair. We could start with the line where it said efficiencies with respect to overtime expenses and mileage. Is there anything there that's driving this? Through you, Madam Mayor, or Madam Chair?
I'm not, who am I gonna turn that over to? To the clerk, or, okay, to you, Madam Clerk?
Thank you for the question through the chair to the councillor. In reference to your comment about efficiencies in budget and overtime and mileage and expenses, that goes for councillors as well as staff. So, for instance, I sent out a report attached to the email to all council that had a meetings tally. What that didn't track was hours or expenses attached to staff, as well as the councillors traveling back and forth to these meetings. And so you take that into consideration, and it does add up. And so in order to meet efficiencies and, ensure that we are managing fiscally responsible, that is part of the suggestions made forward in the report.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate the fact that whoever drafted up this report, I guess our clerk, went out and got information from other municipalities. But quite honestly, as a councillor that represents the taxpayers of Lincoln, I really don't care. I really don't care what Haldom is doing, and I really don't care what Mississauga is doing. I only care that we're doing the right thing. And I do think that, I do believe that there has been some additional, at least from what I understand anyway. I mean, active transportation's been around for 3 years. Heritage has been around forever. Committee of Adjustment's always been there. Now we have no council members, and we have representation, support, whether it be Rebecca or Monica or Trish or Shannon at the housing. So I understand those people are there, and I'm fully supportive. I think we talked about this in December of last year of moving our committee meetings from 7 o'clock, and we moved them to 6. And now this is a move to move it from 6 to 5. I'm fully supportive here, but I'm really having a difficult time getting my hand around the blow up of the committee structure. I guess, Madam Chair, maybe I could ask a question. I'm again not being on the governance and just seeing this this report for the first time in the last 48 hours. I tried to reach out to some of my other colleagues in the CAO, and I heard someone mention a comment that that possibly as we move forward there would be some, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but a discussion about championing. And I think I even saw it in an email that, for instance, let's say as an example, Councillor Rinjima had an interest in housing, that she would be the champion of housing. So through you, I'm just wondering if someone could comment on how that might look moving forward? Because I'm hearing that out there on the peripheral, but I've never heard it discussed at the council meeting. So I'm just wondering if that's something that someone could talk about, because, quite honestly, in the past, as the chair of the first committee of active transportation, I enjoyed my time as a chair. I've enjoyed my time as a chair of infrastructure and committee, and it is something that I have learned to feel that it does give you a lens to look at things throughout the community, and as we move forward with everything we do, and taking that off the table, I think it's really unfortunate that our new councillor members possibly don't have an opportunity to be a chair. That's an aside conversation. I'd like to stick with my original question through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bernay.
Through you, Madam Chair, why don't I take a stab at answering that question? And it did come up through the, I think, consultation process when the Governance Committee did their work in terms of that very question, Councillor, with chairs no longer potentially being in place. How do we have members of council take on issues, take issues of importance, issues that there's interest in, and run with them, champion them, add their own level of expertise to them. And so one of the things that came up, and I think we were tossing around different phraseology, but the one that seemed to gravitate was having these champions. And it really is a matter of having members of council who identify either in a certain area based on expertise or interest, and then that individual, working with staff on a particular issue. And so whether that be significant construction projects, whether that be housing, as the example you mentioned, we would work with members of council who had an interest in that particular area, whether it was marketing and economic development or other potential areas. So it definitely would require both staff and council having more conversations on that in terms of how that would flow and how that would come to the table and how an individual councillor would become a champion of a particular issue. But that was really the conversation. It was one that we spent a considerable amount of time talking about because I think your colleagues, half of them that were around that table that spoke to this new potential model did highlight the importance that the chair role plays. And so now, in the absence of a chair role, how do we capitalize on that expertise and passion and skill set that a number of members of council have? So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you for that. And Madam Chair, I just have one other comment, just a comment. It's not a question, it's just a comment. That certainly over the years, there are many times where you go to an agenda review and you come to a meeting and it's a light agenda. There's no question about it. But I also look at meetings where, just a month ago, we had an infrastructure and community services meeting where we had 4 presentations and everything else on top of that, and that meeting went like almost 5 hours. So I'm having a difficult time understanding. I think this is going to put a lot of pressure on the directors to make sure that the agendas are being properly distributed as we move forward under this format, because, like, quite honestly, I can see some of these meetings going like 4 and 5 hours on a regular basis when we go to this structure. So I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the directors to make sure that proper distribution is handled throughout the calendar year. Just a comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bernay. I see the clerk would like to add some comments. Go ahead, Julie.
Again, speaking to the timing of the meetings and the length of them, I did address that very briefly in the report, and I did mention a delegated authority reporting structure whereby our delegated authority right now is quite outdated. And so how other municipalities who have gone down to this reduced committee structure process, they've increased the delegated authority, whereby some of the reports that are coming to council that have been already approved in the budget are now coming back 2 or 3 times for the same decision. So tenders for that particular project that have already been approved in the budget, and then any kind of updates therefore. So those would be delegated to staff and the CAO, and what you would see then is a delegated authority report where it would summarize what has been happening there. it would still come through the consent agenda. It's just in a summarized fashion. So rather than taking up the items on the regular agenda, that would be through that summary report in the consent agenda, so you could save time there. So there's other ways to have a more efficient meeting. And so by increasing the delegated authority, we can do that. Another example would be our traffic reports as it relates to bylaws pertaining to a road closure or anything like that. Those would be all delegated authority reports. So it's very simply done, and it would just be a rubber stamp.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to go next to Councillor Pachariva.
Thanks, Chair Timmers. You know what, having had the opportunity to sit in the governance committee, a lot of these questions or queries that have been raised today were raised internally at that committee. And personally, I mean, I find it very problematic that, you know, we developed a system of chairs and vice chairs because of the notion that there was limited chance to chair committee meetings. So, you know, I'm going to use my fellow councillor, Councillor Russell. You know, he's been, you know, under me on a couple of chairs or vice chairs as my vice chair, and you know, the opportunity for him to actually chair is now going to be reduced because we're only going to be looking at 2 committees. I don't know of any complaints coming from council about the number of meetings. I mean, you know what, there's a week where we might grumble, geez, we got something on every night, but you know what, we've signed up for this. And like Councillor Brunet said, it's expected. I worry, one of my worries is moving to a 5 o'clock meeting. And the perception that things, and again, this is the public's perception, but it's their reality. You're going at 5 o'clock because you're sliding things through. So if we do go at 5 o'clock, and I'm okay with that, I ask because I do not want to hear it one more time that I receive a notification for a planning meeting that starts at 7 p.m. Okay, that stops, and it stops today. I think actually going through this, and I do a lot of my thinking as I drive because it's just me and the radio and usually my council notes, but I do not look at them when I drive. I think there's a hybrid that might come out of option 1 and option 2, and which would help address committee chairs. And having been a chair, you know, there's a little bit of cachet to being a chair. Councillor McPherson, you know, we've talked about this in the governance committee, Councillor Brunet, Councillor Timmers. You know, you're quoted in the paper, and again, this came up. And for not having the other councillors an opportunity to do that, I think it's a missed opportunity. So we could roll those committees together, still have your council meeting every 3 weeks, do a committee of the whole. You know, Julie had a suggestion where the deputy mayor rotates on a monthly basis. Investigate that, where the deputy mayor then has something to do with chairing those reports within that committee. Because once out of 3 months, you know what, that's a bologna sandwich. And then if you look at the outlay of the meetings with respect to option number 1, we go 9 weeks without having a meeting. So we have a council meeting on July 20th, we go 9 weeks, and we have the next one on the 21st of September. I see that as problematic. I mean, if we're talking about being open for business, if we're talking about being, you know, moving things along, we can't have that. We can't have 6 meetings in the first quarter, 4 in the second, 5 in the third. So I think we need to take a closer look at this. You know, Councillor Njima said, is this the be-all and end-all tonight? No, I think there's room for toing and froing. I think there's you know, room for some adjustments because you know what? It's council that does the meetings. It's council that reports back and forth to the people. We're not getting paid overtime. So it's up to us to say, how do we want to hold the meetings? And if you have problems with it, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Thank you, Counselor Pachariva. Next, we have Counselor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Thank you to the clerk's office for this report. Just a couple, they were questions, but they've been covered already. Councilor Mikulik commented on the public meeting process, and Matt answered that, so thank you very much. And also to pick up on Councilor Brunet's question about the controlling overtime resources, so that was great, thank you. And so I guess my other comment, just to add on, I know Councilor Pachariva already added this too. The 5 o'clock timing to me is troublesome. Number one, personally, that's rough to make 6 o'clock. And it's just I think we're going to limit the public access to a 5 o'clock meeting, because I think a lot of people would fall into that same boat. So that would be, I guess, my only fear is that starting at 5 would keep a lot of people away. They're going to say, "What's the use?" And I'm not so sure it would be we're trying to pull one over on them. I just think it's a matter of them being able to be here, and if we're going to take all those public meetings and have them at those council things, that I would be worried about that. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple thoughts. I was on the governance committee, so I helped give some input into this. When I looked at it in terms of efficiency, and I looked at it from three kind of spots. First being the end user, and I think that's the most important one. What would this impact be on residents? I think not only the scheduling of what our current system is, but also how the meetings kind of not necessarily play into each other, but right now it seems the committee meetings are, there's a little bit more strength to the committee meetings, and the council meeting has become more of a rubber stamp, which again, sometimes I find that problematic because essentially we're just ratifying something, in some cases, something we just talked about earlier in the week. And again, I just find that sometimes a waste of time. When I look at some of the agendas on meetings, even tonight's meeting, we were through 85% of the agenda by about 20 after 6. And I'm concerned with public perception of how we're using our time. Again, they don't necessarily know how we get paid or how staff get paid, but perception is if they're watching this on video and we're out in half an hour, 40 minutes, again, there's a red flag for me. I'd rather see less meetings, but more content across the board. Whatever the actual variation of schedules looks like, that's, again, I think time management is key. I think Councilor Breton brought up a couple great points about the importance of agenda management going forward and some of that delegative authority and how that could maybe lessen some of the agenda items coming to council and, again, making the time that we do use in council more efficiently. I think the content that's going to be at the meetings, as we discussed, would be the same content that residents would receive during the committee meetings. And again, they would have the same time allotment as far as open houses go and open meetings versus when actual things are ratified and decisions are made. So I think all that stays the same. The second lens I go to then is staff. And again, it may just be me, but it really bothers me when, again, I see a light agenda and we have staff waiting around here until sometimes 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock with really no input and again, no reconciliation value of what their contribution was for that night. And again, it's just part of their role, I understand that. But if we could make more efficient use of their time, I think the new model, either 1 or 2, would address that where there's less time for staff to go after hours, and again, they can spend more time in hours in the office working on the projects that they should be working on. The last lens, and the one that I think is honestly, to me, the least important, is from a council perspective. And personally, again, to be able to chair a meeting, to be a vice chair, sure, it would be great, but it's not the end-all be-all for me. I want to make sure that we are using our time as efficiently as possible. And if we can do that in another model than we currently have, I'm all for it. Like, I don't see the benefit necessarily, other than development, which I think is key, but anything beyond that of being a chair or being a vice chair, essentially, again, from what I've seen, it's a lot of meeting management, which is great, but again, there's nothing that can't be done through the normal council process. And I think this will bring a lot more weight to that council meeting, either option 1 or 2 or a hybrid of the two. But I think we do have to seek some sort of efficiency in our current schedule, because right now, and again, if anybody has a different perspective, by all means, but if you look at the course of our schedules, I can't see that we are honestly always using the most efficient amount of time when we're at our meetings, depending on if it's council meeting or sometimes even some of the lighter agended committee meetings. And that's where I would like to see some condensing.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I have Mayor Easton up next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I just would like to, through you, respond to Councillor Brunet's question about and the use of the word champion. I don't know whether anybody else used that terminology or not, but I certainly did. It was in reference to a model that I had seen used in Lincoln, England. They had, and I didn't speak to the clerk about this before she brought this package forward to the committee. It just happened to be an experience that I had. They had less council meetings. They were committee of the whole meetings. However, there were a number of councillors, not all councillors, because it was really based on what the individual interest was. And so there were councillors that had very, very significant roles to play in policy direction. And they would have a committee that they would chair that would be outside of the public process to move an agenda along. I'm not making any judgment on what would be similar to the Municipal Act. I don't even, I don't see how something like that would actually work in the same way here. The point being that people that have, councillors that have interest there are ways that they can really be leaders within the community. And so that was just one thing. I wanted to make sure that Councillor Brunet knew some of the source for that. There's also, over the last little while, I think the routine nature of work as the budgets are brought forward are, and the move away from practices and more policy directions are certainly evident in the way we're doing our business. There's always exceptions to these things, but if there is a routine, it's because we're creating it ourselves through the planning, the nature of our planning, our setting of strategic directions and our planning. The delegated authority, when things have already been approved, we could address that separately as we evolve in our work, where we bring less and less routine items to the table. And I'm sure there's alternative ways for us to deal with that. And I do support the comments made about the delegated authority, removing the discussion, the public discussion, the nature of public discussion by the council, which is our role, to make sure that people have information available. It's a bit clumsy sometimes, but it is the nature of democracy, and so we shouldn't forget that, and I certainly didn't hear people putting that aside in the earlier discussions. I also believed, as a result of this recommendation, that outcome measurements would become very significant. We don't have the best data backup, and so the IT discussions and the kind of backup systems that we need, whether we purchase those on our own or we purchase those with other municipalities, I think are extremely important, because the expectations around any variances from what we've approved will be very high. And so I think that's another piece of it. You know, certainly I want to be absolutely clear that I was not in favor of option 2 because the role of the mayor is such that the mayor is the head of council, and I felt that option 2 certainly diminished the role of the mayor. And so to make that significant change, and in terms of the expectations that people have of the head of council, I was not supportive of that, and I categorically refused to fall into line with option 2. And so I understand the concerns of council. The procedural bylaw has always, from the very beginning when procedural bylaws were developed, have been bones of contention because they interfere with the right of the council, the elected official, to function face forward with the community. It doesn't mean, though, that we can't do things better. So, you know, if we have a little bit more time to think about this, maybe there is another hybrid, as Councillor Pacharivas suggests. Maybe from the discussions, there will be other suggestions that might come forward from staff, which I think should be very welcome. This is a big jump. There's no question about it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mary Easton. I tend to agree, this is a huge jump. So that's kind of where I'm thinking as well. You know, we don't have to jump on this tonight. We have time. We can definitely have more discussions on this, but I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you to Mrs. Kirklos. With regards to notice of workshop meetings for councillors, so currently my understanding, it must be a nightmare trying to schedule these meetings amongst the 9 of us, coordinating our schedules and getting back to you. And I appreciate that. I just, now giving up that ability to have a quorum, 48 hours notice seems like a pretty short period of time to receive notice of a possible meeting or such. I'm concerned about, you know, I don't even know what's going on in my life, you know, day to day. So 48 hours is pretty short notice for myself that I appreciate. Is it possible to give us a little more time than that? You know, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through you to the councillor, Madam Chair. So the notice of meetings, so what I have on the 2020 schedule is a committee of the whole workshop bi-monthly, so you would already know what those are scheduled for. 48 hours notice allows us to, if we need to make any changes to the agenda or add items to the agenda or publishing the agenda, but otherwise, those meetings are on the calendar as scheduled. 48 hours notice would also mean if we had to cancel a meeting, and we have that timeline in there.
Okay, well, and I appreciate that answer. Just, I know we've had meetings, workshop meetings that pop up or that come up where a request is made by us, you know, our availability for workshop meetings should the date change and that sort of thing. Then another question I have, if I may, through you, Chair Timmers.
Go ahead.
When consulting with the other municipalities, are they all currently using the model that we're using right now, or what models are the other municipalities using? Just to say you've consulted with them doesn't really say a whole lot as far as whether we're doing things right or wrong or what, you know, is preferred.
So normally the area clerks for Niagara region meet on a regular basis. I'm also in touch with Zone 3 clerks, which are also throughout the GTA. When I say that I've consulted with other municipalities, we've studied their agenda management procedures. We've spoken to the clerk. We've also spoken to other legislative staff. So some other scenarios include a rotating chair through the regular council meeting, whereby the mayor would open up the meeting and run through a portion of the agenda. It would then rotate to whoever is the chair for that meeting or that month, and then the gavel would be handed over to that chair to run through a portion of that meeting. They would finish off the meeting, or in some cases, they would hand the gavel back to the mayor to read through the bylaws and then confirm the proceedings and ratify council decision. So there's various scenarios. There's various options that you can choose. The one option that I did run through the governance team was that the deputy mayor's schedule rotate every month and have the report section of the council agenda turned over to the deputy mayor. This scenario would allow for every member of council, including the mayor, to have an important role every 3 weeks, as well as develop the skills related to the meeting management and relationship building with staff and the public. So there's various scenarios that you can do, which meets all the needs of council as well as the mayor to ratify those meetings. So I'm welcome, I understand it's a change in thought process, as well as how we meet, as well as what this looks like for the future, and it's a lot to take, and I can appreciate that. So if you're not ready to make a decision tonight, we can definitely defer this.
And that's maybe perhaps, this is it's quite a change, both scenarios, and then the possibly deferring it back, taking comments, and bringing back another proposal might not be a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also sat in on the governance committee, and everything that was brought up tonight was discussed at the governance meetings. And, we probably had 2 meetings instead of the 1 meeting that was planned as a result of a lot of the discussion that we had. And, I think that, there's obviously advantages to move to every 3-week meeting from a speed standpoint, and obviously from a staff efficiency standpoint. I think that there is a significant loss if we lose chairs. And I say that for personal experience, and I also say that for development of new councilors, that we've got an opportunity to play a different role than just your regular council role, and there is a learning there, and it does develop the councilor. So I think that's a potential loss as well, that if we move to the mayor running every meeting, with the exception of committee of the whole, and quite honestly, the committee of the whole for me is basically opening the meeting, handing it over to the presenter or whoever's running that particular meeting, and then closing the meeting. And it's not the same as being the chair of business finance or being the chair of community services. It's got a different level of importance, if I can put it that way, than the other chairs. So I truly think that there is a takeaway from the councilors if we're to move to this. So I think we've got to keep that in mind. I'd also like to maybe table the time that we want to start these meetings, and maybe that's a separate discussion, because I'm not sure 6 o'clock is working. When you look at what councilors have to do to get here for 6, and is 5 o'clock the answer? I don't know. Is 7 o'clock the answer? Maybe it is. Maybe we need to look at that again, and also taking the residents into account. If we're to look at going to 5 o'clock, what does that mean for planning committee when we have potentially a 20, 30, 40, 50 people that want to come and attend a meeting? How does that work for them? So It's not an easy answer. I appreciate what the clerk is working on to make us more efficient, to get through reports quicker. But I think we've got to sort of take the whole thing into perspective and really look at what are, at the end of the day, what are the advantages of doing this on a whole. I think Councillor Russell laid it out pretty nicely as far as level, or who is important first, second, and third. But I think we've got to look at what is the gain to be made, and then we also look at, okay, what are the cons? Why? What is preventing us from maybe making this move, and why? So all that said, I think there are some important things that are changing here potentially from a counselor role, and I think we've got to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. I tend to agree with a lot of what you've just commented there. I struggle with losing our standing committees. I feel this is a huge move, not only as councillors, but to our public as well. The public know and understand the standing committees. And we have all our citizens groups that are committees, citizen committees that report to these standing committees. So I cannot get my head around how this is going to work. I think I have concerns around losing the committees, confusion within the public. The 5 o'clock start, I don't see the public coming. I will struggle with the 5 o'clock. I'm struggling with the 6 o'clock. I don't know. I think there's a lot more to this. We need to really think about the council's role and what we're doing here and how it's perceived in the public and our voice around the table. I'm just afraid of these mixed agendas flying through and getting thinner and thinner, and we just become rubber stamping everything, and losing our discussion on topics that are very important to the public and why we're here in the first place. And I don't know. I'm nervous about this. I feel very uneasy. The first term of council I was on here, we had eight standing committees, and someone would chair for 4 years. And then we made the great move. I was so happy to make the move to where we went to 4 committees, and everybody was going to rotate. Everyone was going to have equal chance and opportunity to chair. And as Councillor McPherson said, it's very important to build your skills and your experience as a councillor. And when you're a chair of a committee, you're out, the public know, like, so-and-so is the chair of planning or the chair of community services. And they have they have a sense of the work that we're doing. I'm just worried about it all being lumped into an agenda. I don't know how it's gonna look. I seriously don't know how it's gonna look. So I personally, I don't support either of these options, and I really would like to take way more time and look at this some more, because I think there's a lot of things that are not answered here for me. So just my comments. I'm going to go to Councillor Rajima. Oh, sorry, did you want to speak first? Okay.
Okay, so I was just going to say something that I think you were alluding to as well, and that's public expectation. And I know when I go on some municipalities' websites and I try to find an agenda for a topic, and it's very difficult if it's not clear what each meeting is for and what each meeting, it's very difficult when each meeting is not, or each committee is not clearly named in accordance with the business that they're conducting. Not that difficult, but it's difficult.
Sure.
So from the public's perspective, again, I agree that I think that it's a lot easier for them, just from a communication perspective, to be able to find what they need to find and to know where to go, to find what they want to find, and to know what meeting to go to listen to and discuss what it is they're concerned about when each committee is named in accordance with the business that they are undertaking. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few comments, and I think I will echo what I'm hearing from members of council and suggest that a deferral is probably in order right now for us to go back and I think do a little bit more work with members of council. But a couple of comments I want to make. There is a meeting being held or being called. Invitations haven't come out with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in the coming weeks. One of the things they want to talk about now that governance is over and currently is no longer on the table is how do we do things smarter. So they've talked about being smarter, faster, and looking at better service delivery models for our public. I'll jump in making that conversation or that comment to say the planning challenges through Bill 108 are real. You know, if I was to ask Kathleen and Mr. Bruder how much time they spend writing reports, that's all they're doing is writing reports right now. So it does limit their ability to contribute and execute on the other projects that we want them to execute with. And I know it's not important, the staff lens to this, but I will echo that staff lens to this and then end with some comments about the community and better customer service. You know, my job, what you, I think, want me to do is manage the right work, ensure that it's getting done when it needs to get done, and I think that's what we're trying to do here. So I realize we may not have nailed it with this particular option or this particular version that we've brought forward, but we continuously look at how can we do things better, should we be doing things better, and so every decision we make is, of course, with the community in mind. I don't think anyone is debating that. I think everyone knows that. And in terms of delivering better customer service. So there are some things we need to address on the planning side. Those are real issues, and those are issues that I think can't wait too long. That doesn't mean we need to run and do everything in the fashion that maybe we're describing it. The delegated authority piece, in terms of meeting management, will then be integral. So should we keep status quo in some semblance? We need to collectively become more disciplined in that delegated authority piece in terms of what we bring to committee and what we don't bring to committee. So I think there's definitely a hybrid, and that hybrid could be everything from what was discussed this evening to keeping the current process and moving forward maybe with delegated authority criteria, and then, you know, slowly moving through some of these. But those would be my comments. I was handed something by our clerk that talks about we actually don't need a motion or vote just to refer this report back to staff. So in terms of procedurally, great discussion this evening. I'll leave it in your hands, Chair Timmers, but again, we don't need anything other than direction to refer this back to staff, and then we can have more consultation with members of council.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So we don't need a motion, so I'd like to know how, thoughts around the table, are we in agreement to defer back to staff? Is that the consensus? Do we need to put that to a vote or not a vote? No, I'm good. Do you want, is everyone in agreement? Okay, everyone in agreement, if you would just raise your hand. Is that a vote? Okay, well, I want to make sure, pardon me? Okay, we need a majority vote. Okay, 1 second, let me just put you in the queue. I just want to make sure that everyone is in agreement. I have Councillor Brunet with a comment here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, and so I understand as we go away from this, because I heard considerable comments tonight about the 5 o'clock start. So I understand from the CAO and from the clerk that there's maybe a hybrid model we can come up with, but who's making the decision on the 5 o'clock start? Because, you know, when we have a counselor that says, I have difficulty with this, I can't make it, like, I don't want to put someone in a position where they can't be making our meetings of this magnitude, and the public sector as well. Like, from the 7 to 6, I've noticed a change, and now to go from 6 to 5, I do have a concern with that. So I'm just wondering, as we go on this deferral, the 5 o'clock, how is that being left? Because I have some issues surrounding the discussion that I heard tonight. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, based on, I think, what we've heard tonight, one of the comments I'll make is that any change is council's change. Staff is here to execute council's decision, and so if I'm hearing tonight that 5 o'clock does not work, maybe that doesn't go into our hybrid conversation. I've heard loud and clear, 5 doesn't work. I'm seeing at least half of the councilors around the table, the members of council nodding. That can absolutely be something that we park, and we look at what other potential synergies or opportunities there are for efficiencies when we do come back. So nothing's happening right now. Again, we are in council's hand. This is council's procedural bylaw. Our job is to provide you advice on certain things, so nothing will be happening with time. And again, I hear loud and clear, 5 may not work. Strongly does not work, if I was going to be a little more bold.
Everyone's good? I don't see anyone in the queue, so we don't need to do anything further? We're all good? Okay, all right, thank you. So, moving on. So we have no confidential items? No, it's just being deferred back to staff. Oh, Mary Stin?
Chair, it would be very beneficial if we could receive a list of the comments that were made, even to the point possibly of grouping them, so that we don't lose sight of what the important elements are. And then we can include on that list that 5 o'clock is not negotiable at this
Okay.
time.
Thank you, Mary Stin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Okay, duly noted. Okay. Everyone's good? We have no confidential items. Staff remarks, do we have any staff remarks? Seeing none. Committee remarks? Seeing none. And with that, being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned.